Kyle Larson will attempt to run the Indy 500 once again in 2025. Rick Hendrick officially confirms that Alex Bowman will be back in the 48 car in 2025, and Bubba Wallace's future for 2025 is a little uncertain. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint schemes we're taking a look at is Josh Berry and Noah Gragson's 2024 Bed Bath Beyond schemes that we'll see this weekend at Watkins Glen. It looks very similar to the oversized schemes, it's just different color. It's cool to see Bed Bath Beyond continue to grow once again, and pretty crazy that they'll be sponsoring Noah Gragson and Josh Berry this weekend at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Timmy Hill's 2024 Coble Enterprises paint scheme that we'll see at Homestead later this year. I like this a lot. Colors look great. Love the pink on it. It looks pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack later this year at Homestead. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Parker Clearman's 2024 Bruschetta Bourbon scheme that we'll see, believe, this weekend at Watkins Glen. I think the colors look pretty solid in my opinion. It's really cool to see Scott Bruschetta, who currently owns this organization, get the chance and opportunity to run this scheme. It looks pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osabar and Corey LaJoie's 2024 Mattress Warehouse schemes that we'll see throughout the 2024 season. I believe Carson Osabar is going to be driving the car at Watkins Glen, and then Corey LaJoie, I believe, will drive it at Bristol. I think these look great. It's crazy. Mattress Warehouse is sponsoring Cup Series car. We've seen a lot of crazy sponsors come into play, and pretty cool they'll be sponsoring both these drivers this season. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sammy Smith's 2024 Pilot Flying J scheme that we'll see next week at Bristol. I like this a lot. Junior Motorsports knocked this one out of the park. It looks pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Bristol. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Connor Daly's 2024 Polka Dot scheme that we'll see at Kansas in Homestead. Polka Dot, which has been a loyal sponsor of Connor Daly's. Pretty cool they're sponsoring. I think the colors look pretty great on it. I think Nice knocked this one out of the park. Looking forward to see it out on the racetrack later this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 Rich Mar Flores scheme that we'll see this weekend at Watkins Glen. Alpha Prime did a good job on this paint scheme. The colors look great. They look pretty awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Watkins Glen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2024 Kroger Old El Paso scheme that we'll see this weekend at Watkins Glen. I'm not a big fan of the scheme, to be honest with you. The colors don't look great in my opinion. I feel like the yellow is a little bit mixture. It's cool they're bringing another sponsor in, but I'm not the biggest fan of this paint scheme, to be honest with you. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Dye's 2024 Race TSS scheme that we're going to see, I believe, at Kansas later this year. Scheme looks pretty cool in my opinion. Call did a pretty good job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack later this year at Kansas for the Xfinity Series race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Marsville Xfinity Series race in November as they have a title sponsor. The race is going to be called the National Debt Relief 250. Pretty interesting sponsorship. I believe this might be the first or second time National Debt Relief has sponsored so far this year in 2024. It's crazy it took this long for them to finally announce it, but at least we do have an announcement out on that. I think it's a very interesting name, and at least the Xfinity Series race in Marsville officially has a title sponsor for the event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jay Buford. As it was announced yesterday that Jay Buford will drive the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. Originally, Jay Buford was supposed to drive a 74 car for My Karma Racing for the remainder of the season, but I'm guessing funding and sponsorship fell through. But he does have a little funding and sponsorship going into this weekend. Now, I believe the 07 car is locked in on owner's points, if I remember correctly, so he should be able to be good to go to be running this weekend on points. So there's going to be a lot of really competitive drivers in the field this weekend. We'll see how he ends up doing, and we'll see if Jay Buford can have a really strong, great run. Hopefully, he can do a solid job with SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen in the Xfinity Series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cath Lake. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Cath Lake will drive the 51 for Dale Coyne Racing in the IndyCar season finale at Nashville Superspeedway. Cath Lake's been driving a 51 car all oval so far in 2024, including, of course, at the Indianapolis 500. Now, we've seen this 51 car has some good runs, but obviously this car needs to try to get into that top 22 in the leaders circle money, and I don't think they're going to be eligible to reach get you that leader circle money at the end of the year. That being said, if Cath Lake can come out of this weekend with the top 20, I think that'd be a really good run for it, considering 27 or 28 cars, I believe, are showing up this weekend. So it's still going to be a very stacked and pretty competitive IndyCar field. It's really exciting stuff nonetheless for sure. Hope Cath can do a really solid job. I think Catherine is a talented race car driver. I've seen what she's been able to accomplish and see what she's been able to do. Hopefully she can have a good run with the O'Quinn Racing in IndyCar this weekend. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Keller. As it was officially confirmed by NBM Motorsports that Kyle Keller will drive the 13 for NBM Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. Kyle Keller has made select starts basically in ARCA over the course of the last few seasons, and I think Kyle is definitely a very talented race car driver in the lower series. I think he's going to have a hard time making the field, however, considering NBM Motorsports has kind of struggled so far in the 2024 season, but I do think Kyle is going to have a very solid chance and opportunity to be very, very competitive. So we'll see how he ends up doing. We'll see what he can do with NBM Motorsports. We'll see if the car can have pace and speed, and we'll see if he can have a fantastic run with the organization this weekend at Watkins Glen. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dead On Tools. As it was confirmed on Monday early morning that Dead On Tools will sponsor Anthony Alfredo for 4 of the last 6 NASCAR Xfinity Series races in 2024. The first sponsor in Talladega, then the sponsor in Las Vegas, then the sponsor in Martinsville, and then the final race will be at Phoenix. Dead On Tools has been loyal to Anthony Alfredo in the past. They sponsored him when he drove for Our Motorsports back in the day in the early 2020s, and now they're back, and I believe they also sponsored him, of course, when he drove for BJ McLeod last year, and now he's going to have a chance and opportunity to work with Dead On Tools once again. I think they did a really good job on the paint scheme. It does look pretty solid, and it's really good and awesome to see that Dead On Tools continues to work with partnerships and will work with Anthony Alfredo once again in 2024. Really awesome and exciting stuff. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about R.C. Anderson. As it was confirmed on early Monday afternoon that R.C. Anderson will drive the 14 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. R.C. Anderson has made select starts with SS Greenlight Racing over the last year or so, and to be honest, I think R.C. is a pretty talented road course racer. He was solid in IndyCar at times, and he did make his Cup Series debut a few years ago for Rick Ware Racing, which back in the day, SS Greenlight and Rick Ware did have a technical partnership. Now, realistically, this car has struggled to get in on owners' points. I do think they've got some coming into the weekend, but they're going to have a little bit of difficult time making the field, with there obviously being a lot of really great talent running this weekend. We'll see how he ends up doing. We'll see if he's got the pace and speed to contend. It'd be cool to see him have a chance and an opportunity to maybe run up front, but I don't expect him to be a major threat and contender to go get the victory this weekend in Xfinity at Watkins Glen. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Thomas and Newey. As it was officially confirmed on Monday early afternoon that Thomas and Newey will drive the 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. We kind of talked about this on the channel earlier this week, I believe on Monday if I'm not mistaken. That was rumored that he was supposed to make another start with the team. And I believe this will be either his second or third career NASCAR Xfinity start. Now he should be able to make the field because the 35 car got a ton of points this past week at Atlanta, where I believe Mason Maggio got a top 20 for the organization. So I do expect that Thomas is going to have a really solid shot and a really great opportunity to end up making the field on points. I think he's a good driver. He can get the best out of equipment. Hope he can have a really solid and strong run. I do think he's going to be pretty competitive for sure. I think Thomas could have a really strong and very solid run with Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen with the number 35 team. Hope he can have that good run that he's looking for this weekend. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ed Jones. As it was announced yesterday that Ed Jones will drive the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing for 2 more races in 2024. The first race will run as Watkins Glen, of course, this weekend, and his next race will be at the Charlotte Roval. Ed Jones, a former IndyCar driver, and I believe he's competed at Formula E and IMSA as well back in the day, has made select starts in NASCAR Xfinity competition so far in 2024. And while the finishes really haven't been there for Ed Jones. Ed Jones has had some solid performances in the past in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So I do think Ed Jones, depending on if they can bring the best equipment out there, I could see him maybe getting a top 10 or maybe even a top 15 at the lowest, because we saw Sam Hunt have a chance to win Atlanta this past week, and I do think that Ed Jones is a pretty talented and a pretty stout race car driver in his own right. This is a great opportunity for him. I think he'll be pretty fast. I think he definitely will be pretty competitive, and I do think Ed Jones will have a pretty solid and a pretty strong run. Looking forward to what he can do these next couple weeks. I do think he'll get one top 10 potentially in both these starts in 2024. Will he go full-time in NASCAR? That is to be determined at this point, but I'm glad to see Ed Jones getting a shot at opportunity to drive for Sam Hunt Racing this next couple of weeks. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about FrankieMZ. As it was announced on Monday that FrankieMZ will be back in the 22 truck for Raymond Brothers Racing later this year at Kansas. I believe Frankie's only got one more scheduled truck start after this event. Frankie, of course, signed a 4-race contract with the organization, made his truck debut earlier this year, and then, of course, he did run an ARCA race with Ram. I think, unfortunately, finished outside the top 10 because of an engine issue in Michigan, if I remember correctly, where he finished, I believe, 14th or 15th in the race. Now, I don't expect Frankie to be the most competitive in this truck. Rayum has struggled on pace and speed a lot of this year. I know Loss has had some good runs with Rayum in the NASCAR Truck Series this year at times where he's had top 15, top 20 speed, but realistically, this 22 car struggled with Keith McGee and other drivers, so I really don't think Frankie's going to do great. Now, I do think Frankie is going to do better than what Keith McGee's done, but that's not really saying much at this point. It's a great opportunity nonetheless for Frankie, though, to get to run in the Truck Series once again. I know Frankie's had ambitions to go Cup Series racing. I don't know if he's ever going to get that chance to go Cup Series racing at this point, unfortunately, simply based on the fact that he's not going to be in the best equipment. Obviously, Ford tried to find him a full-time Xfinity ride. He's supposed to take ownership of Gase Motorsports. That never happened, unfortunately. But Frankie, at least, will get the chance and opportunity to race once again in 2024. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dawson Krom. As it was announced yesterday that Dawson Krom will drive the 92 car for DGM Racing for 5 races for the remainder of the season. Dawson Krom, who's a pretty solid race car driver, has made select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for teams like Mike Harmon Racing, ran a majority of the year with JD Motorsports this season for unfortunately losing his ride halfway through the year as JD Motorsports is no longer showing up to the racetrack as they're trying to basically figure out what they're going to be doing going forward. Now, this is going to be the best opportunity that Dawson has ever had in his career, as I feel like DGM Racing, while they're not the fastest organization in the world, they're certainly not the slowest organization out there. And I do think if anyone can get the best out of that equipment is Dawson Krom. Now, realistically, I think the goal should be top 25 at the minimum and finishing the races. If he can finish top 25 in this car, I think that's going to be pretty awesome and really impressive for him. So I hope he can at least finish in the top 25 for sure in all 5 of these races. Yes, the Xfinity Series field is super competitive with drivers like Shane Van Gisbergen, Chandler Smith, obviously, Sheldon Creed, you name it. Basically, Sam Mayer, all these guys that are very fast and competitive. But I do think at the end of the day, Dawson Krom will be pretty competitive, pretty strong, and I certainly think he'll have a solid chance and a really good opportunity to be pretty competitive with DGM Racing in these 5 races for the remainder of the season. I wouldn't be also surprised or shocked if he does well enough, if he does go full-time with this team in 2025. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the driver incentive program. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Monday late afternoon that NASCAR has been preparing a new program to market the sport more. And some teams last year were concerned by parts of the concept that basically they're going to lose a lot of their traditional assets that they have with this new driver incentive program. Now, obviously, NASCAR is looking to grow the sport in a pretty massive and big way, and that's why they are doing this, which honestly, I can't blame them. Now, I do understand and get the team's concerned in a very interesting way there. However, if NASCAR wants to grow the sport, they have to start promoting these drivers a lot more. But also the drivers themselves, they got to promote a little more in-house as well. And I really hope with this driver incentive program that is coming into play, they can be able to do that where they can have the potential to basically grow the sport in a major way. And I think NASCAR obviously would love to one day get back to having where they were in the 2000s, where they were very, very competitive. They were competing against the NFL and growing the sport where they're getting 5 to 10 million viewers on average every single week. Nowadays, you get about 3 to 4 million, which, by the way, that's still a pretty solid number, all things considered, but it's not the number that I think NASCAR is clearly looking for. They're looking for bigger and better numbers, and if they can get the bigger, better numbers, that's going to be better for everybody, because last year's average was 3.85. I think NASCAR wants to kind of get it back in that 5 to 6 million viewer range, and having a way to grow your brand and your platform, that's one way I think that's going to be able to help him on that front and that asset. So really interesting move. They've been planning this. I know this has been talked about for the last couple of years, but it sounds like they're finally going to put into action, and it looks like they're finally, after months and speculation and waiting on this, it looks like a driver incentive program is finally going to be coming in, most likely starting in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Watkins Glen. As there was a report by Matt Weaver yesterday that Watkins Glen is expected for the NASCAR Cup Series race to have 3 seconds of tire fall off for the event. Another big curveball into the playoff race. The reason to bring in a tire with much more fall off is because of the fact that they're wanting to create a race with a lot more competitiveness and a lot more strategy. If you go back to last year's race, tires had no fall off whatsoever, and you really could not pass. With there being more tire fall off, it's going to create that chance and opportunity for not only more pit stops potentially, but also is going to create that opportunity for some drivers that might be good on tires like this, like a Denny Hamlin, like Amara Jr., like Brad Keselowski, who've been very good at saving tires. Maybe like Kyle Larson, even though Kyle Larson doesn't always save tires, we do know that he can do a really good job at that at times. He got a top 5 at Bristol, and other drivers might be able to show up. It might affect drivers like SVG perhaps, and have a chance to dominate the race, but I do think that it will create a much more intriguing race. Or maybe the engineers are going to figure it out and it won't really matter at the end and the racing won't be as good. But personally, I think, because originally when they did the Goodyear tire test with the wheel force car, they had 6 seconds of tire fall off. Now it's dropped from 6 seconds down to 3 seconds. That's a little concerning. It's dropped a bit. But even 3 seconds of tire fall off throughout the run, that's going to create a pretty exciting and fun racing for the fans. They're going to be showing up and for the fans on TV as well, considering, like I said, road courses generally this year have not been the greatest in the world. I really hope with this tire that they can create a lot of fall off and it can put on a really exciting, fantastic, and great product for us watching. And it could create a lot of chaos considering the playoffs already been chaotic with Atlanta, though it wasn't as much chaos I think we're expecting. I do think this could create some very interesting chaos for some drivers. Nonetheless, really interesting stuff and pretty exciting stuff. Nonetheless, see that there will be more tire fall for the event. I'm glad to say there will be some interesting component to the race to make it a little more interesting going into the event. Really exciting stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Adrian Newey. As it was officially announced yesterday, after months and months of speculation, that Adrian Newey has found a new home for 2025. He will officially join Aston Martin in 2025. Obviously, it was announced a few months ago that Adrian Newey would be leaving Red Bull at the end, or basically no longer working for Red Bull going forward. There have been talk about him maybe going to Ferrari for the 2025 season, but Adrian pretty much denied it. And then there began to be a lot of rumors and speculation that he was likely going to head over to Aston Martin starting in 2025. It's been reported that Adrian is getting paid a ton of money, and from what I understand, it's a 5 or 6 year contract that he's going to be working with the organization. Now, Adrian Newey, for those who do not know, Adrian Newey is the mastermind behind Red Bull's dominance over the course of the last couple of years. He is a major reason, while Max has a lot of talent, he is a major reason why we saw Red Bull dominate the way they dominate the last few seasons and really how good they've been for many, many years. He's been part of Red Bull, I think, since the start when they were around in 2006 to 2007. But there's been a lot of turmoil going on behind the scenes, and Adrian was getting frustrated with how things were going over at the organization, which is why he left the team. I expect Aston Martin to struggle at first with him in there, but I do think in the next couple years, especially depending on whoever gets in there in the future, I do think Aston Martin will get back to where they were many years ago. It's been a long time since Aston Martin was super, super competitive in Formula One, and I think bringing Adrian Newey in to that organization, I think he's going to play a massive, major, and huge role to really growing this organization and making them much stronger. Also, with the amount of money that they have, this could really help them grow in a major and massive way. So this is nonetheless a very huge story for sure. We've been waiting on this. We're figuring out when the hell they were finally going to announce it, and now it's official after months and months of speculation. Again, I really hope Adrian can really help grow this program and make this program a lot stronger, because I think Adrian's a fantastic engineer, one of the greatest engineers in Formula One history. And it sucks he's no longer at Red Bull, but I wouldn't be surprised if Aston Martin's going to try to court Max Verstappen over at this point. But it's also the same time and same focus. Really excited to see that Adrian Newey is now going to get the chance and opportunity to work with Aston Martin starting in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeff Burton. Now, yesterday was reported and posted by RFK Racing that Jeff Burton was, I believe, on the Backstreet banner that they do on there in Series 7 NASCAR radio. And basically a lot of rumors for many, many years have been going around why Jeff Burton was let go for Roush many years ago and Carl Edwards took the 99 route. Now, Jeff Burton actually is something very interesting about it. They kind of explain why he left Roush. Back in 2004, he had basically been, a couple years prior, considered a championship contender with the organization. But around that time, they were starting to lose sponsorship, starting, I believe, in 2004. And Jeff Burton said he was very frustrated and wasn't a fan of how things were going. On top of that as well, the 99 car was not performing very, very well. So Jeff then told Jack that I've got an opportunity to go over, I believe, to work with Richard Childress Racing. You've got a young driver in Carl Edwards. And Jack basically told Jeff that he didn't think Carl was ready. And then Jeff basically said, oh, Carl's definitely ready. And instantly, there was instant sex for Carl Edwards. He had a ton of top 5s and top 10s at the end of 2004 for Roush. And then in 2005, he went on to tie for second in the standings and got third because of the tiebreaker because Biffle got more wins than Carl that season. And Carl had one of the most successful rookie seasons for a driver in the history of NASCAR. I think Jeff Burton, it's kind of good to see him kind of clear the air. And it shows that Jeff is kind of a class act in a way. And Jeff's kind of been a class act over the years in NASCAR history. And it's cool that he kind of saw how much talent Carl really had. And when Carl took over the 99, the rest is history. While Carl never won a championship in NASCAR Cup competition, he certainly was a super competitive and a great force in the sport. To the point now where Carl Edwards is a NASCAR Hall of Famer. And it's really good to see that it wasn't because Jack Roush fired him. Jeff was the one who made the decision and wanted to make the organization better, which is nothing wrong with that. If you feel like you're not growing the organization more and you're struggling with the team, it's not a bad decision to move on. You think about that next year in 2005. All 5 drivers on that organization, Kurt Busch, Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards, Greg Biffle, and Mark Martin all made the final 10 in the standings. Unfortunately, they didn't win the championship. They were still super competitive that season. Unfortunately, they got beat by Tony Stewart at the end of the day. But it's a pretty interesting story nonetheless for sure. And I'm glad to see that Jeff Burton has cleared the air on that story and there wasn't really any bad blood. And that is why he left the organization. I'm glad to see there really wasn't any bad blood between Jack Roush and Jeff Burton in this situation. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. As it was confirmed yesterday that Aric Almirola will drive the 20 for Joe Gibbs Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. This will only be the second start that Aric Almirola has made since basically himself getting suspended from Joe Gibbs Racing. His first start since his return from his suspension from JGR came at Indianapolis Motor Speedway earlier this year, where he was competing for the win and I believe led some laps near the end of the event, where I believe finished in a runner-up position or in third place in the number 20 car. Now, obviously, like I said, Aric Almirola and Bubba Wallace apparently got into a fight in a competition meeting, which is why he got suspended by Joe Gibbs Racing in the first place. Now, normally when we go to a road course, Aric Almirola wasn't the greatest on them, but that was because he was working with Stewart Haas Racing. Remember, last year, when he drove the 28 car for RSS Racing at Sonoma, he went on to hold off a hard-charging Kyle Larson and AJ Allmendinger at the end of that event. So I do think that Aric Almirola is going to have a solid chance and a pretty good opportunity to be pretty competitive in that number 20 car. I think he will be a major factor and a major contender for the win overall. But he's going to have some really big competition in the event. You're going to have William Byron running this race. You've obviously got Shane Van Gisbergen, who's one of the best road races we've ever seen in NASCAR history, and probably going to be a pretty solid Cup driver next season. You've got Connor Zilisch, who's making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut later this year. Or this weekend, I should say. Then you've got other guys like Sheldon Creed and Ty Gibbs. There's a lot of great talent running this event, and unfortunately not Hailie Deegan, but there's a lot of big names that are running this event. And I think that you see what Aric Almirola has been able to accomplish this year. He's gotten one win so far in Xfinity. I would not be surprised or shocked if he goes to victory lane, but he's going to have to go up against some really great competition and some really great talent and some fantastic drivers. I do think that Aric Almirola is going to be fast, and I think he'll have a great chance nonetheless to get the victory with the 20 car. Go Bowling will sponsor the race, of course. I do think that Aric Almirola will be pretty fast and pretty strong, and for sure, very competitive this weekend at Watkins Glen with Joe Gibbs Racing. I expect him to be a major factor for the win for sure. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports once again. As it was reported on the Door Bumper Clear podcast, and a break car kind of quoted this as well, the Hendrick Motorsports reportedly has more than 4 drivers that are under contract at the organization. Now, currently, the 4 drivers under contract for next season at this time, you've got Kyle Larson in the 5 car, you've got Chase Elliott in the 9, you've got William Byron in the 24, and as expected, Alex Bowman most likely will be back behind the wheel of the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports in 2025. But who could this 5th driver be? Could it be someone like a Corey Day, perhaps? Corey Day is expected to make some select truck series starts with McAnally Hogeman Racing at the end of this season. And Corey Day, of course, has had HendrickCars.com as a sponsor. Could he be the 5th driver, considering Kyle Larson is a big fan of him? Could it be Raja Karuf? Raja Karuf has HendrickCars.com, and there's been rumored speculation that Raja could make some select Xfinity series starts maybe at the end of this upcoming season, and maybe, of course, could make some select starts in 2025. Could it be he? Could it be someone like an Anthony Alfredo who's doing test driving for them? I don't know if it's any of those guys. Could it be Kyle Busch? Probably not at this point. The driver I think is the 5th driver under contract with Hendrick Motorsports technically is Justin Haley. There have been some reports, speculation that Justin Haley had been considered to drive the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports, but another rumor that's kind of expected to go around and probably going to be confirmed here in the near future is Justin Haley most likely will be driving a 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025. Now, people will probably also say Carson Ospar. Could it be he? It could definitely be Carson Ospar for sure, but I think it's Justin Haley. Justin Haley is someone who has been heavily liked by Hendrick Motorsports, from what I understand, and they're massive and huge fans of him, which is why, like I've mentioned, that he's most likely going to be the driver getting behind the wheel of that number 7 car next year. Corey LaJoie is expected either to stay in the Cup Series or Rickler Racing or go over to McAnally Hogeman Racing in 2025 in the Truck Series potentially. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens for the future. Now, again, could Justin Haley end up at Hendrick in the long-term future? That certainly is a possibility, and that is certainly a shout. But I don't know if that's going to happen at this current moment and point. It would be pretty exciting, definitely, to see someone like a Justin Haley get a shot and opportunity to see what he can do in a Hendrick Motorsports car, in a really great Hendrick Motorsports car nonetheless. But Spire's going to be pretty strong next year. Remember, he's going to be likely going over to work with Rodney Childers, who, of course, is a crew chief for that number 7 car next season. He wanted to bring someone who has a lot of talent, and Hendrick really likes him, and I think that Rodney Childers is also a massive fan of Justin Haley. Again, it's one of the worst kept secrets in the garage at this point, because we are expecting more than likely, nonetheless, that we are going to end up seeing Justin Haley in the number 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025. It's interesting to see that they've got 5 drivers under contract, and I'll be very intrigued to see that other guys, but I do think it is Justin Haley who's that other driver. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the charter deal once again. Over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of reports circulating about the charter deal. According to Adam Stern, the last place NASCAR charter in the charter agreement from 2016 to 2024 gets about $5 million per year annually, while that will go up to around $8.5 million in the new version signed for 2025 to 2031. In addition to that, concerns that some teams have had with the fresh charter contract include whether they will be limited in having a say over costly rule changes and whether there's new clauses that will impact their traditional relationships that the drivers and the teams have with outside sponsorships. Now, we'll continue on later that evening. Jeff Gordon says we weren't going to get a better deal in regards to the charter agreement. Rick Hendrick echoed those statements yesterday at the Indy 500 press conference for Kyle Larson, and Justin Marks also echoed those same comments as well. Let's begin with the first topic, because I feel like a lot of people were really, really confused when they saw this. A lot of people thought that was what first place was going to get, or everyone was going to get. No, the last place finisher is going to get 70% more money than they were getting. So there's going to be more incentive to perform a lot better. And what that money will do is it will ensure a lot more competitiveness. Do I agree with everything in the charter deal? No, absolutely not. We don't even know everything that is part of the charter deal, but one thing we know for sure, and the teams agreed upon this as well, they basically all agreed that they were going to be getting a lot more money. Now, there's a clause in this charter agreement that would let the France family maybe own a charter, which I don't think they should be allowed to personally. I know it's in the charter agreement now, but personally, I think if the France family owned a charter, that would be a major conflict of interest. Going over to the second thing, obviously, teams wanted to have a bigger say in the rule changes that they wanted, which I can't really blame them for that. I feel like teams should have a little bit of a say on costly rule changes. NASCAR will sometimes make rule changes, and sometimes it's going to cost these teams a little bit of money. Now, we do know that two organizations held out for the charter agreement, 23XI Racing and Front Row, while every other organization kind of basically signed the deal. Some said they weren't coerced to sign it. Some are saying they were coerced. Others saying they weren't coerced to sign it. I'm guaranteed that 23XI was one of those teams that's basically speaking for everybody, even though they're one of the few teams that didn't sign the charter agreement and sign the charter deal. I do believe that both those organizations in the future will likely sign a charter agreement and a charter deal, but it's still kind of unknown at this point if they are going to sign it. But I do think that they weren't going to get a better deal. I know some are saying that the teams really do have leverage still, those two organizations. I really don't think they have as much leverage as some are saying they do. I think their leverage has kind of gone out the window, unfortunately, because of this situation, because every other team signed. Now, could they take them to court? That certainly is a possibility, and that's something that definitely could happen for sure. But realistically, I'm not 100% sure that we're expecting NASCAR to be taken to court from some of these teams and organizations. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that, and we'll see if things continue to get more intriguing around the charter agreement going forward. We'll have to continue to follow the story as time progresses and goes on, going into the future, as more details will be coming out as the weeks progress and go on into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace once again. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but originally I had reported that Bubba Wallace was expected to return to 23XI Racing in 2025. However, his future is a little bit up in question currently at the moment still for 2025. Now, 23XI Racing is still expected to sign Bubba Wallace to a multi-year contract for the 2025 season. However, the reason his future is a little in question is 23XI Racing was one of the two organizations, along with Front Row, that did not sign the charter agreement for 2025 currently at the moment. If 23XI Racing somehow does not sign the charter agreement for 2025, we can not only, one, see 23XI Racing downsize to a one-car operation next year, but that organization's future could definitely be in a little bit of question. Now, I do expect more than likely that they will sign a contract extension with Bubba in the future, but let's say somehow, in some crazy shape or form, they don't sign a contract extension. If they don't, it's going to be very disappointing. Look, has Bubba Wallace been as good as Tyler Reddick this year? No, there's no denying that, but Tyler Reddick is a generational talent. But Bubba Wallace, every single year in the NASCAR Cup Series, since even his rookie year and since getting to 23XI Racing, every single year Bubba Wallace has improved as a race car driver. He's already matched the top 5 numbers that he had from the previous 2 years. He's already matched the top 10 numbers that he had from the previous 2 years. His average finish is already better than last year at this point, and is closing in on leading more laps than he led last year as well, which he led about 225, 226 laps last year, I believe. He's led around 140, 150 so far this year. And I feel like this 23 team has had opportunities and chances to win so far in 2024. They probably could have won Michigan. He probably had the fastest car there. And I feel like that he should have made the playoffs this year. And had we not had the win in your in system, Bubba Wallace would have made the playoffs this year. He's also got better on road courses. He was really fast at Chicago before unfortunately getting taken out by eventual winner Alex Bowman. He's been fast at other road courses. He had top 10 speed at Coda. I believe finished in the top 15 in that race. He's improved on those types of tracks. I feel like Bubba Wallace all around is becoming a much better race car driver, and I do expect that Bubba will be better next year if he gets a chance and opportunity. if somehow in some crazy shape or form they're not able to sign Bubba for 2025, I really don't know where he goes, to be honest with you. Don't know where he heads. Maybe Hendrick Motorsports in some crazy fashion, but probably not at this point. Maybe he goes to another team that wants to pick him up. I guarantee you there are organizations that are definitely interested in picking up Bubba Wallace's services. But I do think more than likely he will be back at 2311. I think once 2311 Racing does eventually sign the charter agreement and the charter deal, I do think that he will evidently be back in a 2311 racing car. And like I said, he clearly deserves to be behind the wheel of a 2311 racing car. And I feel like going into next year, if he is back with the team, which again I do expect he'll be back, I do think that he will be very, very competitive. Now, going through the rest of the silly season, other drivers that are still not officially signed as well. Kyle Busch, while we haven't had official confirmation, we do expect he'll be back with Richard Childress Racing in 2025. Other drivers, we're still kind of waiting on Zane Smith's future. There's rumors he can go down to trucks right now. We do think he'll likely be in a front row car if they're around a course next year. We do think that Just Haley course is going to the 7 car next year, which we've been kind of expecting. And we are expecting some other major and pretty massive, crazy, silly season moves coming down the pipeline here in the not-so-distant future. But like I said, going back to Bubba Wallace, I do think if he isn't back in this car, not only do I think he'll win a race next year, but I do think more than likely he will end up making the playoffs with 2311 Racing once again in the 2025 season, if he, of course, is back with with 2311 Racing next season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, over the last week or so, there's been a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation, a lot of rumblings surrounding Alex Bowman's future. Last week, right before Playoff Media Day, it was reported by Door Bumper Clear that they had heard a rumor that Alex Bowman may not be behind the wheel of the number 48 car for 2025. They basically said depending on how Alex Bowman performs throughout the first round, if he makes it past the round of 16, they had said that he wouldn't be behind the wheel. Then Alex Bowman, later that week during Playoff Media Day, kind of debunked the rumor and denied the rumor by basically saying that he called up his Hendrick bosses. He said the rumor was very annoying, and they basically told him that he had a contract through 2026 and wasn't going anywhere. Then Jeff Gordon went on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio this past week and kind of basically went out and basically was kind of saying, well, he's not 100. He said he was confident Bowman would be back, but he didn't 100% say, yeah, Alex Bowman is going to be back behind the wheel of the number 48 car next year. Well, yesterday at the Indy 500 press conference for Kyle Larson, which we're going to talk about here really shortly, Rick Hendrick confirmed to the media that Alex Bowman will return to Hendrick Motorsports in 2025 in the number 48 car. I'm glad to see that Rick confirmed this. Look, Alex Bowman, while he has not been as strong as his teammates William Byron, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson, he has still been a very solid driver this year. He's had, I believe, 13 top 10 finishes so far. He's had 5 or 6 top 5s. He just had one of the best performances of his season so far, finishing in the top 5 in Atlanta. He had the best average running position. And again, while he's not leading laps, which is maybe the only area where he really needs to work on, he's still done a really great job at Hendrick Motorsports. He's won 8 races at the organization. He's been basically the best 4th driver at the team. I think he is the 4th driver at the organization, but there's nothing wrong with that, considering Hendrick Motorsports might be the most elite organization out there when it comes to all-around talent. You've got Kyle Larson, who has 27 NASCAR Cup wins. He's won a Cup championship, the Southern 500, the Brickyard 400, and of course the Coke 600. You have Chase Elliott, who has a NASCAR Cup Series championship with 19 wins, closing in on the 20-win marker, and has won an Xfinity championship and a Cup championship. And then you have William Byron, who has a Daytona 500 win and 13 Cup wins. Byron has also been pretty elite, though he usually shows up to be more elite in the second half of these seasons. He's been really consistent, that being Alex Bowman. And I feel like that there wasn't going to be a better option to be behind the wheel of the seat. I know some have said Kyle Busch maybe, but Kyle Busch I do think more than likely, even though there's rumors about his future, I don't think he's leaving RCR next year. I think Kyle Busch is going to be sticking around with RCR in 2025. I just don't see him leaving. And then there's really no other options out there. Justin Haley maybe, but Justin Haley, in my opinion, is going to end up Aspire Motorsports next year. So I really don't think there was going to be a better option to replace Alex Bowman in the number 48 car. I think Bowman 100% deserves to be behind the wheel of this seat. I get why people, and again, this has been the frustrating thing. There's a couple of drivers that people always ask for to lose their rides. It's Alex Bowman and Bubba Wallace. And again, Alex Bowman, like I said, has not been as strong as his teammates this year, but he's, I believe, had more top 10s than William Byron's had this year, and I feel like he's had a better average finish than William Byron's had this year. I think Alex Bowman deserves behind wheel up with this team for many, many years. And again, his contract's through 2026. Now, I do want to emphasize one thing that's very important. Yes, that contract is through 2026, but contracts can easily be broken. So let's say in the future, if Bowman doesn't really step up or get better, even though he did really good at Atlanta, if he doesn't really step up and go far in these playoffs going forward in the future, he could eventually lose his ride, let's say in 2026. Because remember, Ally is more committed to Hendrick than they're committed to Alex Bowman. Think about this. Alex Bowman is not really part of the Ally commercials. The person doing the voiceover for Ally is Dale Jr. That's not Alex Bowman. And obviously, like I said, contracts can easily be broken. Just ask Corey LaJoie about that kind of stuff. His contract was broken with Spire Motorsports. He was supposed to be with Spire Motorsports for next season. He's not going to be in that car next year. Think about other drivers like Eric Jones. I think he had a long-term contract with the team, and he got let go at the end of 2020 because Chris Bell had to move in-house and Levine shut down at the end of that season. I think when it comes to Alex Bowman, like I said, I do clearly think he should be behind the wheel of this seat. There's no denying that he deserves to be behind the wheel of the 48 car long-term. The question is going to be with the talent coming up to the ranks, especially Roger Cruz's future, where Hendrick really likes Raja. I would have to think at this point he will be the future of Hendrick going over there. Or maybe eventually Justin Neely gets brought in-house and drives next year for Hendrick in the next couple years. That could certainly be a possibility and a shout. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to Alex Bowman's future, but it looks like for 2025, it is 100% confirmed from Rick Hendrick himself, the source, that Alex Bowman will once again be back at Hendrick Motorsports in 2025. Glad to see that we have the official source, Rick Hendrick, confirming himself that Alex Bowman is not going anywhere and will be back with Hendrick Motorsports once again in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Kyle Larson will once again run the 2025 Indianapolis 500 and will for the second year in a row attempt the Indy NASCAR double. He'll once again drive the number 17 car for Aaron McLaren in the event. Kyle Larson did attempt the 2024 Indy 500, and we'll get to that here in just a second. Now, during the press conference, they did confirm that the Coca-Cola 600 is going to be the main priority. For this year, they made the Indy 500 a bigger priority. I know they initially said the Coke 600 was going to be a bigger priority for 2024, but then eventually they basically made the Indy 500 a bigger priority and led to this waiver debate, and obviously with the team signing the charter agreement, I think that especially with Steve Phelps being at this announcement, I think Steve Phelps basically did come out there. Now, if Kyle Larson does have to leave early and the race goes later, Tony Kanaan is expected to be the relief driver of this car. Tony Kanaan, who works at Aaron McLaren, is one of the higher-ups at the organization and team, has basically going to take a refresher test, I believe, in October, and I believe also take a refresher test in April as well. But they're going to make the Coke 600 a priority. I don't think they want to go through what happened last year. So let's go back to 2024 this year. Kyle Larson did attempt the Indy 500 and not only was fast in the Indy 500, but was super competitive. Kyle Larson qualified not only in the Fast 12, but qualified in the Fast 6 and qualified in 5th position. Now, during his first attempt at the Indy 500, Kyle Larson no doubt made some mistakes. He had a bad race start on the first restart they had, but he picked it up quickly and maintained a top 10 position. And then unfortunately at the end of the event, Kyle Larson sadly got a speeding penalty in the second last pit stop. He got back on the lead lap and I believe finished in 17th in the event and basically made it the priority. But unfortunately, this big rainstorm had affected the whole entire weekend, which is a shame because it was supposed to be this major historic event, and the rainstorm that actually hit my house, by the way, had really been affected by it, and it ruined the event, and it kind of made the Coke 600 later that night not as fun to watch because of it, because there was so much focus on the Indy 500, which it was a pretty good Indy 500, by the way, nonetheless. But this also is a major story. Unfortunately, it's that big storm that came through. And Larson actually flew back to Charlotte Motor Speedway to run the Coke 600, finish the Coke 600. But NASCAR decided to call the race mainly because of Fox's decision. They decided to call the race early because of humidity, even though the track was pretty much almost ready to go. I know reporters were saying that the track was too wet. I call BS on that. I think the track was ready to go. Denny Hamlin even said they were about to get back in their car 10 to 15 minutes. And had Larson gotten there, which he did get there, by the way, to get behind the wheel, he never got that chance and opportunity. And then it led to this waiver situation, which this waiver stuff was stupid. They given out waivers for everything, including drivers right, rear, and down a racetrack, and all that kind of stuff, like Chase Elliott and other drivers doing this kind of thing. And then, of course, they don't give Kyle Larson. They were talking about not giving Kyle Larson a waiver because the higher-ups in NASCAR were apparently really pissed off and upset that Larson made the Indy 500 a priority. Despite the fact that the Indy 500 is a bigger event itself than the Coca-Cola 600. This is no disrespect to the higher-ups in NASCAR, and I know the Coke 600 is still one of NASCAR's biggest crown jewel events. But the Indy 500, if I got the chance to run the Indy 500, sorry, I'm taking the Indy 500. But I think they're being smart this time around to put all the focus on running the Coke 600, and if it comes to fruition with weather, hopefully, which will stay out of the area, by the way, this time, Larson get the chance and opportunity to run this. I expect Kyle Larson to have a really strong chance to win the Indy 500 this year. He is one of the best drivers in the world, maybe in my opinion, the best driver in the world, and Kyle Larson was so fast last year. I expect him to have a really good chance. I think he will have learned from the mistakes he made in year number one. And you need to learn from those mistakes, right? Drivers are going to learn. It's year one, and really the only major mistake he made was a speeding penalty, and that's something you can learn by doing practice. So Kyle Larson is going to get the chance and opportunity to do the October test later this year, and then, of course, we get to do tests in April, which I think they should kind of find a way to condense that. Now, I do think, like I said, Kyle Larson is going to have a fantastic chance and a really great opportunity to compete for this win. I generally would not be surprised if Larson wins the Indy 500 and then goes to Charlotte later that evening and wins the Coca-Cola 600. I think Larson is going to be super fast in both races. We know that 5-car was running 13th with Justin Allgaier. And no disrespect Justin Allgaier, but Justin Allgaier is not on the same level as Kyle Larson. Could you imagine seeing Kyle Larson sweep the night by winning the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 on the same day? That would not only be the biggest motorsport story maybe of the year for all motorsports across the board, but it would be a national story. And it would bring Kyle Larson and maybe NASCAR too back in a major position they haven't been in years. And think about this. This is also going to be the first Amazon race. Dale Jr. is going to be calling that event. Imagine Dale Jr. seeing Kyle Larson get that chance. That'd be really, really cool. I expect Larson to be very quick. We know Aaron McLaren's equipment was fast last year. Alexander Rossi had arguably the fastest car at the end of the Indy 500 before, unfortunately, having fuel issues and fueling problems. I do think, like I said, Larson is going to be very strong and super, super competitive in this event. I think it's very smart, like I said, they are putting all the focus on the Coke 600 to try to make sure they don't piss off NASCAR once again like they did. I do think Kyle Larson, though, is going to be super strong, super competitive, and I think he's going to have a really great chance and a strong opportunity to win the Indy 500 in 2025. Obviously, he's got to qualify his way into the event, but if there's anyone that can easily do it, it's Kyle Larson. I'm excited about this, and I'm really glad to see, once again, after a lot of speculation, that Kyle Larson is finally running the Indy 500 once again in 2025. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment below your thoughts on today's episode. How do you think Kyle Larson is going to do in the Indy 500 next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How happy are a lot of the Alex Bowman fans that Alex Bowman is going to be back in Hendrick? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Bubba will be back at 2311 next year? Let me know it in the comments below. Later today, we'll have NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for Watkins Glen. Then tomorrow, we're going to have race picks for the Gold Bowling at the Glen. The Penske video most likely as well. And if any major news breaks throughout the rest of the week, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.